try to do. You are the one at the end of the day, do your will. Help us right now as we move through this process and this webinar so everybody will get the answer for their needs and we will glorify your name. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And now let me introduce to you Pastor and Dr. Jerome Hurst. So we can hear from his mouth a few words of encouragement, and also we will move forward in the schedule for the program. Pastor Hurst, welcome and thank you for joining us and co-host this program
Recording
with
in
us.
progress.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sergio, President Brown. We are here to, and all of you all who are have joined us for this important webinar. Um, we recognize that this is a topic of great significance in the world in which we're living today, and many of you are aware of some of the recent developments that are happening in the United States and have made it crucial for us to stay informed about our rights, especially as they pertain to immigration. And the landscape surrounding immigration laws and policies can often be confusing and at times overwhelming. And so we thought that it would be pertinent for us to just bring and get some information in our hands from someone, from expert, so to speak. And we have one of the best, attorney Andrea Stewardson, who I have had the pleasure of working with in conferences and other places through, and we're just so glad that she is able to join us, be with us tonight, and you're going to be blessed um, by hers. Attorney Stewardson is a highly respected immigration attorney with many years of experience helping individuals navigate the often complex and challenging immigration system. Her expertise covers a wide range of immigration matters, from legal rights and protections to the latest changes in policy. She's dedicated her career to advocating for immigrants and ensuring that the legal resources and the support that they need to succeed here in these United States. And so we are incredibly fortunate to have her with us tonight, and she'll be sharing some valuable information about our rights. What I'm asking you to do is, if you have questions, if you would put the questions in the chat. We're going to just allow her to present. She may answer some of your questions as she presents. And then between Dr. Romero and myself, we will read the chat and pull any questions so that when question and answer time come, we then can just ask those questions and she can answer them. So if you'll put them in the chat, we would appreciate it, and we'll monitor the chat for your questions. I'm going to give the time now to Attorney Stewardson. Thank you so much again for being with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hurst, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I've represented Allegheny West Conference of Seventh-day Adventists for very many years. My relationship with Pastor Elder Brown goes back a long time. So this is a privilege for me to be able to do something a little bit different than and give you some advice. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I am also an immigrant. So I have been through the immigrant process. I know what it is to be questioned by an immigration officer. I know how the anxiety. So I've been through the process of being sponsored and getting my green card and becoming a citizen. So everything that I'm going to talk to you about is nothing that I haven't been through. I'm a true immigrant coming into the United States. Okay, so let's just talk about, and I'm going to not talk for very, very long. I'm going to try to do my presentation in a short period of time because I know that you have a lot of questions. But I just want to talk a little bit about why we're here this evening. And as I'm looking among the names I see some names that people I have represented over the years. So it's a privilege to serve you, and people I haven't seen their names in many years. So I'm very glad that you're here. All right, so let's talk about why we're here this evening. We're here because there have been some changes in immigration policy, and they've been very swift and quick. Let's start. We knew about it during the campaign of the now President Trump. He said that immigration was going to be a big issue. It's going to be the major issue, one of the major issues of his campaign. And he said that there were going to be mass deportations of those who were undocumented, especially if they had criminal records. So, when people say something, you got to believe them. Well, we believed him, right? So we expected this. On January the 20th, it was Inauguration Day. It was also Martin Luther King Day. And on that day, there were 100 executive orders. And there was one specific executive order that basically said this, that the sensitive areas, what are those sensitive areas? Those were like those sanctuaries, some schools, some churches, and hospitals where you could expect a person who may not have immigrant status or the right to be here would be protected, because it's a sensitive place. It's a protected place. So if they were there, no matter if it was at a school or in a church service or at a hospital getting treatment, they would be protected. That is now all gone. As of January the 20th, under that executive order, that is gone. And what does that mean? That means, basically, that an immigration customs and enforcement officer, I shouldn't say we affectionately call them ICE, but that's what they are, an agent, is now empowered to go into certain sensitive places. They can go into a church, any place that's public, a church congregation, a church sanctuary, can go to a school campus, can go into a hospital. Of course, there's certain places in a church or a church building or a school or a hospital that is, there's a reasonable expectation of privacy if it is demarcated as so, but still, for example, a church congregation going into a church sanctuary, that is now a public place. So because of that, we need to know, we need to be prepared. That's why we're here, because we've been hearing about it. We've been also hearing about a lot of different things. Immigration officers showing up at different places. And so we're here tonight to give you some valuable information. I hope it will be valuable to kind of help you to be protected and give you some information to your congregants and people in your community. So here it is. Who are they targeting? Who is the Immigration Service targeting? They're targeting
Andrea,
people.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Could you please give us some shorter phrases so the interpretation can catch up and translate everything? Just a little bit shorter phrases, so a little slower so they can catch up. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I forgot that I have to speak slower. If attorneys like to talk a lot, they have a lot of information. So I'll try and talk a little bit. So thank you for that reminder. Okay, so the question is, who is immigration targeting? Who is ICE targeting? Okay. At first, it was said that they were targeting any immigrant, undocumented person who has a criminal record, or somebody who doesn't have immigration service with a criminal record, like a felony, not usually a misdemeanor, but some kind of violation. That was who they were targeting, and they would make sure that they were headed for deportation. Okay? But what we're seeing, that's not just who they're targeting. They're targeting anyone who does not have legal status in the United States. And who are those people? Those people are individuals, that undocumented individual is a person who comes over the border and there's no record of them here in the United States. That's an undocumented person. There are also individuals who came into the United States legally. They had a passport, they were expected at the border, and then for some reason, they got out of status. So they came in legally, They came in legally, but they overstayed their status and now they're not in status. You have the individuals who may have come in legally. I'm sure you've heard of the different programs. There was a humanitarian parole program where you're allowed to come into the United States if you're from certain countries, and then you're able to get a work permit and a social security number. And I'm sure you've heard in the news that some of those parole programs are now at an end. So what does that mean for the individual? If you stay beyond the time that you were allowed, you will not be in valid status in the United States. And then you have those individuals, they came into the United States and maybe they had legal status, maybe they didn't, but they applied for something called temporary protected status. We call it TPS. And it's granted for individuals who are coming from certain countries where something catastrophic has happened. So they can't return home to their countries. And the United States designates certain countries where they'll say, okay, you're here in the United States, you can't return to your home country, so we're going to protect you from deportation and we'll give you a work permit while you're waiting. As of today, the country of Venezuela is now off that list.
Yeah, I'll let you sit here.
But it's not on that list anymore. So what's going to happen to those individuals? If they overstay the time that they've been allowed to, they will be subject to deportation. So you have a set of people that are that the Immigration Service is looking for. Individuals who have filed for green cards and for some reason it was denied, so they don't have status in the United States anymore. They're going to be on the list for deportation. And what does deportation mean? That means that you should get due process in an immigration court, or in certain cases, you can have your removal expedited. One more, asylum. I'm sure you've heard that word before. That's when you come into the United States, even legally or illegally, and then because of something happening in your homeland, you possess a credible fear that you cannot return to your home country, because if you go back, you may be persecuted. So you have individuals who have applied for asylum, and right now those asylum cases are taking a long time. But while you're waiting for your case to be heard, you're allowed to get a work permit and you're protected from deportation. There is a warning about these cases because the current Trump administration has warned that those asylum cases are now going to be expedited, and the individuals, if they do not make the cut to show that they have this credible fear, they will be in removal proceedings. So right there, we have a lot. We have a lot of people. It's not just about people who have a criminal record. And I'm going to add one more set of people. Individuals who are lawful permanent residents. They actually have their green cards, right? But for some reason, they may have broken the law in some way. Cocaine charges, marijuana charges, a felony charge, domestic abuse. If a person has that type of criminal charge, you could be made inadmissible to the United States. And what that means is that you may be placed into deportation proceedings. So just because you're a lawful permanent resident doesn't mean that you're protected. You're basically a non-citizen and you could end up in removal proceedings. And even though people sometimes feel very, very protected because, oh, deportation or asylum is taking so long, this administration has promised that they're going to expedite these proceedings, so people will not be waiting for a long time to have the case to be adjudicated, and the standard will be higher, and therefore you will see more people being removed from the United States. Okay, I've said a lot. That's a lot of information right there. Does anybody have any questions before we go further?
Good question.
At this point, family, if you have any questions, en este
Good
momento,
question.
si tienen cualquier pregunta, por favor, pónganla en el chat. Escriban su pregunta en el chat para que podamos responderla. If you have any questions, please put the question on the chat. Família, e você tem alguma pergunta, coloca aí no chat para que a advogada, a Andrea, possa responder também.
Can I be heard? Can you hear?
Yes, we do hear you, sir.
Me? Good evening. Good evening. I have a question for one of my from one of a church member. He was in the U.S. before, and he was deported for some reason, and he came back and through Mexico, and ICE let him in. And now they give him a paper. Now he has TPS, but however, he has to go back this coming Tuesday to see a judge. And what do you think of this? Should he go to that court meeting, or it seems to me he will be deported anyway. What do you think of that?
He should go to the meeting, because if he doesn't go, if he doesn't show up, what's going to happen is that they're going to put a warrant out for his arrest. So he should go. Because once you don't show up, that means they'll put out a warrant with no, that means you are evading your hearing. So he needs to go. But he should go with representation. And do you know what kind of hearing is it? Is it a merits hearing or a calendar hearing? What kind of hearing is it?
We don't have the kind of it, because they give him until 2 years, and the 2 years seems to me have been expired. So this coming Tuesday, and he has to see a judge at the end of it. And that's what I have about the case.
If you find out what kind of hearing it is, you can send it to Dr. Marrero, and he can forward it to me so I can look at it, because there are different types of hearings. You could have a calendar hearing. You can get a calendar hearing where you just want to find out if anything is new in your case, if you have a claim of relief, and we can talk about that a little longer, or it's a merits hearing where you have to present the facts of your case. I have a feeling it's probably a calendar hearing.
Now you said something about the TPS, and those who have TPS, if they come, which is those who come from Haiti, of course, and since he was a protect status, and the way Haiti is going on now, with kind of political brouhaha we have in that country, do you think that the Haitians will have such a protection on the TPS on the Trump administration anymore?
Okay, so we've only heard about one country, the designation for Venezuela being lost to TPS, but I don't think it's going to be the only country. You're going to hear about other countries as well. Before the end of Trump's administration, the last time, TPS for Haiti was coming to an end. I remember when it was 18 months, and then they reduced it to 6 months. So I have a feeling you're going to hear something about Haiti probably the next few weeks. I don't think any country is going to be immune. You're going to hear more about, because that was the goal, I think, before under the previous administration. And that was a big concern.
All right, Andrea, there was a question in the chat that said someone came on a B1, B2 visa and COVID came, so they couldn't go back. And so they're now writing their NCLEX exam. And will they be able to get an employment visa after passing the NCLEX, or because they overstayed, they won't be able to? What's their status?
Okay, so when you'd have to find out some information. A lot of people came in during the United States, and they were as visitors, and they couldn't leave because of COVID, and they were encouraged at that time to file an extension of that visitor visa. You can't just stay here, even though your visitor visa has expired. So in order to show that you're in valid status, you should have filed an extension. And even if it was late, it would have been accepted. But no, we're like 4 years, going into 5 years since COVID. So they're not going to just accept that as an excuse why you didn't do something for the past few years.
Okay. What about medical offices? Where does ICE supersede HIPAA protections?
No, it doesn't. Because that's expected to be confidential and private. And what we're really hoping is that the schools, churches, and medical records, it shouldn't really have anything to say about your status.
From Africa.
So you're expected to have those kinds of records should be confidential. And if they want to look at it, they would have to have a warrant signed by a federal judge to have access to it, and for a specific reason.
So, Andrea, maybe just so we don't, in general terms for others, what are some of the how do religious institutions, church, schools, how do they play a role in supporting immigrant communities in light of where we are now? What can we do as a church and as our schools? What are our rights and what if someone shows up? How should we respond and those things?
Okay, so I've given you a lot of bad news. Okay, but the thing is that we are in the United States of America, and our laws, the Constitution, is the Supreme Court law of the land. Anybody who's studying the citizenship examination, that's like question number 1. What is the supreme law of the land? It's the Constitution, and the Constitution has 27 amendments, and the 4th and the 5th Amendment basically says you have a right to not say anything that will incriminate you. There's another right that you have, which basically says that you are protected from an unreasonable search and seizure. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that it doesn't matter what your status is in the United States. As long as you're present and your foot is on U.S. soil, you have rights just like anybody else. You don't have to be a citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or even a work permit. You could be undocumented. As long as you're present in the United States, you have certain rights. I'm going to speak to anybody who's undocumented right now. You have rights in the United States. So that's the good news, okay? And there are certain things, and so the Constitution offers you a certain type of protection. So, for example, let's talk about the question that Dr. Hurst talked about. What's the role of the church? I'm going to break it down in 2 ways, okay? What is the role of the church? The role of the church is that, well, first of all, I'm speaking to any church administrator right here on our call. If you're a pastor, you're working for the conference or anything like that. What I would suggest for you is that you need to have a specific, you have to have a certain type of protocol. You have to be prepared for the visit of an ICE officer. This is not something that could happen, it will happen. Whether they want to talk to you about one of the congregants or constituents, it could be a student, it could be one of your employees. It could be they just want to make sure that the individuals that you're hiring, you have the legal right to hire them. So it is going to happen, no matter what kind of status your employees have. So the first thing that you have to be aware of is that, that's going to happen. So my suggestion is make sure you have one person designated to answer that call when it comes in person. It may come up at random They're not going to send you a card or a letter or and call you on the phone and let you know they're coming. They're just going to turn up. So make sure you have one person who's prepared. It doesn't have to be the president. It could be your communications person, but one person who is aware, who's going to be prepared, okay, and be the voice of the organization or the voice of the church or the voice of the school. It doesn't have to be the principal, but somebody who's prepared. I would suggest also that person, we all get a little uncomfortable sometimes when there's law enforcement, okay? But the thing is that you have to have once you know your rights, you got to assert them, right? So if somebody comes on your premises, whether it's at the church or the school or the conference, one of the conference entities, you have that designated person. That person has to be cool and calm. Gonna treat this person just like we're all supposed to be professionals anyway. So act like a professional, right? If somebody comes on your premises and you don't know who they are, the first thing is, can I help you? Even though they have a big badge and they probably have the word ICE written all over them on their back or whatever, and you see a car outside, can I help you? Is there anything I can assist you with? And then if they say they're here to look for somebody or they need to see certain records, you can, take them to you want to take them to a place where it's not in the view of everybody else. And then you're going to say, okay, well, we don't consent to this. Our rule basically is you don't want to consent to anything, okay? And if you don't feel comfortable speaking with this person or handling this person, then speak to somebody at a higher level. And it's perfectly fine to say, I don't consent to this. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I prefer if my superiors can handle this. If you leave me your telephone number and your contact information, they can call you. If they insist, then you say, I just want to let you know on record that I do not consent to this. And if you proceed, I need to see a warrant. I need to see a warrant. And it's not just any type of warrant. It must be a federal warrant signed by a federal judge. And of course, the ordinary person is not going to know what this is. But Dr. Romero, I sent you a lot of documents. There's a sample of the type of warrant that you should look for. If it's a warrant signed by an immigration officer, it's no good. The warrant must be signed by a federal judge, and you need to acquaint yourself with that. That's why it's really important for the person who's going to act as a designated person to handle this situation. You need to be prepared, and you need to feel confident to assert yourself. If they don't have a warrant, they're not allowed to come on the premises and do anything. And also, you are aware they're public spaces. Let's talk about a church, for example, one of your biggest churches. I don't know which one it is, but it's big, right? Right now, that sanctuary is a public place. You want people to come in to hear about the three angels message. You want to hear about the sanctuary doctrine and all of those things, right? So it's a public place. It's okay. So an officer is going to feel, an agent is going to feel empowered to, now that the sensitive areas is gone, to come into that church. But you, as a church, you have private places that you expect that there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. And where are those places? The Sabbath school rooms, cradle roll rooms, youth rooms, fellowship hall. You wouldn't expect somebody from the street to just wander around the church to go in those places. The pastor's office, if you have a special place for the mother's room, there's certain places that are public and there's certain places that are private. And a lot of churches that I've been working with, they're beginning to put up signs that say private to make sure that people just don't wander around and that can be protected. But the sanctuary is public. But can an officer just walk up and down? No, you can't come in and disrupt the services. So you really, and if they're coming to look for something, they have to have a reason. They have to have that warrant to be able to find somebody. And if they do have this warrant, it's not the obligation of the pastor or whoever's there to help them out. They have a job, let them do it, but you don't have to help them identify somebody or point them to someone.
Awesome.
Can I ask something very quick about it? Exactly what you said.
Tu já fez ali, eu posso lavar o fogão já?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So if I use my right to be silent, to keep silent, what can happen later? Are they gonna schedule like a court, or
Tá ali.
what can happen
Aqui.
later? And how can I, if I need, how can I like protect myself?
pra
Like
não-
okay, then I can ask for a lawyer or
Aqui,
someone
tu vem
else.
atrás, cadeira.
That's a very good question. The thing is that you have to make sure you don't have to say anything. Most individuals get into problems because you're intimidated. You're
Uh-huh.
intimidated, and they ask you your name and they ask you your status, and people get into trouble because they give that information. The whole thing is that you're not supposed to give consent, and so not to give they can't take away someone unless you have due process, unless you identify yourself and they know information. They can only get that information from you, or
So
unless
I don't
somebody
I
has
don't need
pointed them
I don't
out.
need even identify me. Okay, can I stay quiet to don't say who I am?
That's correct.
Oh, thank you.
In
Okay.
fact,
Awesome.
I think I've given some information out to Dr. Romero and Dr. Hurst, basically saying that you can print out these little cards that instead of you even saying anything, it says on it, I reserve the right to exercise my amendment right not to incriminate myself and not say anything, or I refuse to say anything. I have the right to be silent. You can give it to them and say nothing. And if they still
Thank
are
you so much.
badgering you or take you away, you can it's actually pre-printed cards, and we can help you get access to them by basically saying that I'm not going to sign anything without the presence of an attorney. I'm not going to say anything without the presence of an attorney.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, I see that some have been writing some things in the chat in Spanish, so I want to give Dr. Romero, I don't know if you have seen those, but while he's looking at those, one of the questions that came in was that we're talking about the children now, if their parents are taken into custody, what happens to the children? One, if the children are American citizens, and then what happens if the children are not American citizens or documented? What happens with the children?
Okay, a couple of things. I think families who are undocumented or who are at risk, because there are certain individuals that are at risk, you have to plan. Planning is your best mode of protection. If you have children and you have fears about the situation, you got to make a family plan. You have to, and I think the information that I gave to Dr. Romero has examples of what a family emergency plan is. One of the things that we're talking about is if you're in this situation, you should start preparing a guardianship document. In some states, as long as you have it written out and notarized, it's okay. So you can have somebody that can take care of your children in your absence. In case something like this happens, in certain states, it has to be filed with the local court in your county or in that state. So it depends on the state, okay? But in that situation where the parents are taken into custody, you should have, if you have that before, then you can have a guardian. That guardian can take care of the children in your absence and act on your behalf. There's a difference, of course, between children who are U.S. citizens and children who are who don't have status in the United States. I'll just let you know, if you're a child in the United States, even though you are here without status, you are not accruing unlawful presence until you turn the age of 18. So those children are not, unless the parents want them with them, they are not a priority for the Immigration Service. They're here, but they're kind of not here, and they're not going to become illegal until the age of 18 when they become an adult.
Okay, we have another question That is from one of our Hispanic members. They are saying that what happened with those children or kids that were not born in the US, but they have a grant for college. Now they are in college, so they would like to know what is going to happen with them.
But how old are those children?
That's a good question. Apparently, they are college age because it's not the age there, but that was the question.
It doesn't matter. If they're over the age of 18, if they're over the age of 18, they're now adults considered by the Immigration Service. It doesn't matter if they have a grant in college. They're present in the United States illegally, and they will be removable. They're eligible for deportation. It doesn't matter if they have a grant to go to college or we have lots of students who are dreamers who have been fighting Immigration Service for years, even if they are given scholarships by their schools. So that does not protect them. And when you say a grant, what does that mean? Is it a scholarship or
probably scholarship? Yes.
Okay, that doesn't make a difference. That doesn't make a difference.
Okay, we have Mercedes. She raised her hand, and we are going to let her ask her question.
Thank you, Pastor Romero. For those families that are undocumented and have in their own homes, like what type of arrangements should they start making in the event of deportation?
That's a good question. You're going to have somebody to act on your behalf. I would appoint somebody, a power of attorney, in case something happens and you won't be able to you won't be able to speak on your behalf. Have a person who can handle your financial affairs, and you can do it by a notarized power of attorney. Somebody that can handle your affairs, access to your bank account, those types of things, in case of an emergency that would take effect on that emergency happening.
Thank you.
One more question, Andrea. It has to do with those that already got a green card. They are asking if those that got a green card are also at risk of being deported or their green card being removed.
I think we've covered this before, but just because you have your green card doesn't mean that that you don't have a reason to worry. Okay, I have counseled many young men. For some reason, the age of 18 to 21 is a witching hour for some young men. They get into trouble, sometimes little things, sometimes big things, and they're lawful permanent residents. And they got into some problems, and because of that record, sometimes it has prevented them from becoming citizens, and sometimes slated for deportation. So just because you have a lawful permanent resident, that doesn't protect you. What I would suggest, if you're a lawful permanent resident, try to apply for citizenship as quickly as you can. If you're married to a U.S. citizen, you can file for citizenship after 3 years of being married and having a permanent resident card. If you got your lawful permanent resident another way, after 5 years of being a permanent resident, you can apply for citizenship, and you don't even have to wait for the whole 5 years. You can file it 90 days before your 5-year green card anniversary.
Great. Andrea, one more question. At some point, and I asked you this question in private before,
Okay.
We try to provide like a member, SDA member credential, but it comes with what you mentioned before, that if we are stopped by ICE members, are we supposed to provide any sort of documentation, or we don't have to provide any names, IDs, or anything?
I think if you're undocumented, I would prefer, if you're undocumented, I prefer that you don't carry any ID around with you, because that is what they would use to identify you. It's different if you may not be a lawful permanent resident or a citizen, and you want to show you have the right to be here, then you should have something. But I think you need to be very careful. If you're undocumented, and you don't have the right to be here because if you're picked up or you're questioned and they find some information on you, then that's your ID right there. So I think you have to be very careful when you're undocumented, the kinds of information that you carry around.
Perfect. Thank you very
Especially
much.
if you're saying to them, I'm not saying anything.
Okay, now, so if we break any law, example, work without working permit, can we be deported?
No, we have to, there are different types of violations. There are different types of violations that you have, and some things can be forgiven and some can't. There are certain things like we talked about when we apply for a green card, there's a whole long list of things that the Immigration Service doesn't like. But even if you work without legal authorization, that doesn't mean that you will be prevented from becoming a lawful permanent resident in the future. Sometimes the Immigration Service has a wide range of discretion. You probably heard of this. It's called favorable discretion. It's like mercy, for example. You do some things without authorization and you're doing it to live. For example, I've had clients who have had to work without authorization because they're trying to support their U.S. citizen children. And the Immigration Service can forgive that because they're taking care of a U.S. citizen child. Working without authorization is bad, but it's not as bad as the other things. The things that really tick off the Immigration Service is if you have a criminal record, or if you use public benefits, like you registered for state benefits like Medicaid or something like that, and benefits that are provided by the federal government, which you're not entitled to. They don't like stuff like that. Any criminal activity, domestic abuse, they hate that. If you say that you're a U.S. citizen or you try to vote and you get a voter registration card or something like that, they don't like those types of things. So those are the kinds of things that tick them off. But employment, being employed without employment, working without employment authorization is not an automatic bar for deportation.
One more question. H-1B visas are now under Trump's administration harder to get or the same as before?
I think it's harder. It was hard under the Trump administration before. Like under H-1B, H-1B is, just for those who don't know, it's a specialty occupation visa. In order to be eligible, you have to show that the position that the person is being sponsored for requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree in the area that they're going to practice. And usually, once you show that the person is eligible and the position is eligible, you should be okay. Under the former Trump administration, we found that they were asking for extra information that was kind of beyond the purview. So what I'm trying to say is that I still think we'll be able to get cases approved, but it will be harder. They'll be asking for information that's not necessary. I'll give you an example, I remember filing a case for a teacher, right? A teacher for a religious organization. And if you know anything about teachers who serve with a religious organization, you'd expect if they have the position should require the minimum of a bachelor's degree in education, right? If you're working for a religious organization, you don't really need a license in the state. If the state does not require a license for the teacher to practice in that state, then you shouldn't have any problem. I filed a case like that, and I tell you, it took me 6 months to argue with the Immigration Service that they required a license for the individual. They wanted a license. And we kept on going back and forth about this is a religious organization. They don't require a license. Department of Labor, they said they don't need a license. The state at the time does not require a license. Back and forth, 6 months. We got it approved, but it just took so much extra work. A case that should have been approved within like 4 weeks took 6 months going back and forth, and we got it approved. But it just shows you the extra type of requirements and the things you have to jump through to get the case approved. So I think it will be harder. Another thing with H-1Bs, you have to show that they're going to make a certain income, a level of income, the minimum. Under the previous Trump administration, they wanted you to have, instead of an entry level, they wanted you to have a very high salary, because they said that if it was a true H-1B position, you should pay this person a lot of money into 3 figures. Entry level teacher, sometimes she may earn in the 30s or in the 40s. It doesn't mean that it's not eligible for that position. So they were putting a lot more scrutiny on certain cases than I think was due. And we got them approved, it just took more work.
So, Andrea, question. You've shared with us a number of things that we should get in place in case or when something happens. And so some of those we may feel as though, maybe I need some legal help in getting this together, but because of my status, I'm afraid to seek legal help. How should they move in that instance?
Well, I think you have a lot of nonprofit organizations that can help. It's true for certain individuals, you may not have an answer, but you still have rights here in the United States. We're here today, and it's been what, like an hour, basically an hour, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of things. But if you never know, there may be something specific about your case that merits some kind of help. We've talked about people in TPS, we've talked about people coming from Venezuela, but the Immigration Service has so many different types of visas. You never know, there may be something specific in your situation that you may not think is important, that may be important to get you some kind of help. This is not a promise, but what I'm saying is that if you think that I would speak to an attorney like myself that may be able to see something in your story that may be able to get some kind of benefit. Even if you're undocumented, if you show, for example, there's something called a U visa, I'm sure many people would have heard it. If you were a witness to a crime and you're helping law enforcement, that may be eligible for a visa. If you show, and you've heard about the children at the border, if you show that you're abandoned, you don't have any family to return to in your home country, you're eligible for benefits under the immigration law. If you're a battered wife, you're married to a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, and he left you and neglected you, or he died and nothing was filed for you before, you're eligible for immigration benefits. So what I'm saying is that there's certain things in your story that you may be eligible. It'd be good for you to speak to someone who does this kind of work all the time that may be able to find a way for you.
Okay. We have been going for about an hour. You've given us a lot. So maybe you could just give us a closing argument, closing statements to kind of what is a takeaway that we should take away from this. And I want to say before she gives that there are a lot of these conversations that Sister Andrea Attorney Stewardson is taking part in for other conferences as well. And what I will do as I see them through the parole departments is I'll share it with Dr. Romero and our communications person, and we'll try to post it so that you can hear it again. Because the more you hear it, next time some other questions may be answered. So we'll try to keep you informed of all of the little webinars for different conferences and groups that are
Plus,
going.
you need to hear it more than once to remember.
Yes. So, Attorney Stewardson, what would you say a closing out for us as a takeaway that we should hold on to that could kind of take us?
Okay,
Andrea, right before you go on your closing words, there is one question that I think it's important, but you can tell if it is, okay? It is on the chat. It says, should I begin to place private signs on rooms, certain rooms at churches?
That's a very good question. I get that question all the time, okay? I have a church that said they want to put a big, big billboard outside of the church to say private. Great idea. That's probably not going to work because that's not a reasonable expectation that to your church that your sanctuary is going to be a private place. Some churches, I have to tell you, actually, I think it's a pretty good idea, but will it work? The thing is that we're all learning this. This is a whole new world for us. But I think there's certain places that you expect to be private. The sanctuary is probably not supposed to be private, but things like the rooms I talked about, the pastor sanctuary, private. The bathrooms, private. You're not expecting anybody just to walk into those restrooms. The kitchen, the fellowship hall, the Sabbath school rooms, in the cradle road. You're not expecting anybody to just walk into those rooms unless they have a specific purpose. The youth rooms, any special rooms that are designated for counseling, for mothers' rooms. Yes. So those places that are outside the pure view of the sanctuary, you can put up nice big signs that say private.
Thank you very much.
And you can do that at the schools as well. You're not expecting office people off the street to be walking around. They can be in your parking lot. They can be on the ground because unless you have a gate or something. But there are certain places at the schools that are going to be private. The principal's office, the nurse's office, certain classrooms. You're not expecting anybody to just walk around without ID or anything like that. My closing comment. I think just what are your rights now for the individuals who are documented, and you're worried too, because everybody is worried. Okay, if you're a non-citizen, this is what I'm going to tell you to do. And we're not talking about the undocumented right now, or people who are in the United States without status. But you're worried, right? Make sure you always carry an ID. Carry a picture ID, whether it's your work permit, whether it's your passport, whether it's your driver's license. And then proof of your status in the United States. So if you have a R1 visa, the approval notice or your I-94 document, it doesn't have to be the original, but make sure you carry that with you. If you have a work permit, issued by the Immigration Service, carry that with you. Because if you have that with you, that shows that you have status to be here. Suppose you have your green card application filed, but it's not approved yet. You have an I-485 green card receipt notice. That shows that you're a pending permanent resident of the United States. Carry that with you because that shows that you have the right to be here while your case is being processed. So carry that with you. If it's a TPS that's still viable, carry that with you. The Form 86, if you're on TPS, you know what I'm talking about, that I-821. It's a protection against deportation. So you need to carry those things with you because that will protect you, okay? Now, I think the best place to end here is basically, I'm just gonna go through really quickly, know your rights, okay? And it's already on a document that I sent Dr. Romero, but I think it's important for you to know, first of all, what if ICE visits your house? If the ICE comes to your house, the first thing, remain calm and know your rights. Do not open the door unless you have a warrant, okay? And if they have a warrant, ask to see it. Don't open the door. They can slide it under the door, or they can put it against the window or something. You need to see a warrant before you consent for them to enter your house because that's your private space, okay? And if you're in a situation where you talk to them, you can say, I choose to remain silent. I don't have to answer your questions. So do not open your door or step out. You have the right to refuse entry without a signed warrant. And if they try to question you, ask for an attorney. That is your right. It's not a right for you to have an attorney be provided for you free of cost, like in a criminal case. But you have the right to not say anything unless you have your attorney. Don't sign anything. If they give you something to sign, no matter how nice and smiley they may be, don't sign anything, because you can say, I don't have to sign this. I don't know what I'm signing. I want to have somebody that can advise me if I should sign it or not. Okay? By the way, the word voluntary departure, make sure you know that word. You see that word and it sounds kind of nice, right? You know what voluntary departure means? Is that you're going to leave the United States willingly. So you don't, those kinds of words, you want to stay away from them because you don't understand what it means, okay? Please don't lie to an officer. And the reason is that if you're caught lying, they can say that you gave fraudulent information, and that can be grounds for removal. But you're not supposed to lie to an immigration officer. Get in touch with a lawyer immediately. If you're detained or arrested, try to get through to an immigration lawyer immediately so you can be guided through the immigration process. Make sure your family is aware. It's kind of hard because this is a hard topic. It's like telling your children, help me while write a will. You want to prepare your children for you dying, right? But it's something very important for you to do. So make sure you have a plan. Make sure your family members know where the important documents are. In case of something happens and you are removed or you've been detained, who you can call, who they can call, and where all the important family documents are. Make sure you keep emergency contact information handy and have a family plan. So those are the kinds of things. I'm going to end on that note. I always think that it's important to have knowledge. It's hard to talk about a topic like this because it's difficult, but I think being here is important for us to plan and be aware. The more that we're aware, the more that we're protected. Last week in Maryland, because I'm in the state of Maryland, the Washington, D.C. area, where there was a big raid up in Owensville, Maryland. And I'll tell you the reason why the individuals were detained is because they opened the doors to the apartment. The ICE officers came in, knocked on the door, they opened it, and asked them their names. They gave them their names and asked for their immigration status. And in the end, they were removed. And a simple reason, they opened the doors and granted them access to the apartment. All the apartments on like 2 different floors. If they didn't even open the doors, they would not have been detained. So knowledge is power. Another thing is, and this is my last thing to say, is that you have to be, when you know you have rights, you have to be assertive. And if you don't feel as if you're confident enough, have someone who can speak for you. You can't, this is a very serious situation, and you have to feel and believe that you have certain rights to be here, and you have certain rights that you can exert, and be confident to be able to exert them. And I think that's it from me. Any more questions, or is our time up?
I have a question.
I think there's a very important question. First, go ahead, Sister Martin. We have about 5 minutes, so we'll try to make it quickly, and then Pastor Brown is going to give some closing remarks, our president. Sister Martin, go right ahead. And while she's asking that one, the other question that you, so that I don't have to break in, is, which I think is a good question, what's the difference between undocumented and out of status? So if you could work that in as your answer. Sister Martin, go ahead.
Yes, 2 quick things. First was, is it possible that ICE will show up at the churches unnoticed or in disguise, or do they have to make it known who they are? Like, could they be sitting in our congregation as visitors or something? Because I'm just wondering, should we remove names off of bulletins now and from flashing people's name on the screens and things in the churches? Or do they have to notify us that we are here? That was first. And second was, you said to make sure there's a warrant. If they showed me a warrant, I wouldn't know what to look for. So what am I looking for in the warrant? Must it have my name and a judge's signature? Must it say they can come in my house? What am I looking for if they show me a warrant? So those were my 2 quickly. Thank you.
Okay. That's an excellent question. Let's I'm going to answer, there are 3 questions right there. Let me answer the first one. Okay. So what's the difference between somebody who's undocumented and a person who is out of status? An undocumented person is a person that the United States, USCIS doesn't really know or should not know that they're here. That means that they came into the United States and didn't check in through the airport. They weren't inspected. They didn't come in with a passport. They didn't get the passport stamp. They kind of just walked across the border. Or they, as one of my clients did, he swam from the cruise ship into Miami, into the bay in Miami. So there's no proof of them being here in the United States, or no entry into the United States. So you're undocumented. You were not inspected or go through any of the security or port of entries legally into the United States. You can't just walk or fly into the United States, okay? So that's an undocumented person. And if you don't do anything, there's no record of you at all. You're undocumented. No, but it's different for a person who's out of status. That's a person who, they came into the United States with a valid passport and they probably had a visa. They came in with a visa, so they came to the airport, they were let into the United States. The United States has a record of them, ICE has a record of them entering the United States. But for some reason, they got out of status. For example, that individual we just spoke about, she came in during COVID and then she couldn't leave. And so she's been here ever since. Anytime you're under a visitor's visa, B1, B2, you're only allowed to be here for 6 months. So after 6 months, if she didn't do anything to extend her status or ask for the immigration service to extend her status for additional period of time, she is now out of status. And when you're out of status, it's very hard to get back in status. The only way that you can get back in status if you get married to a U.S. citizen, and that, as we say in the immigration service world, that will forgive your immigration sin of being out of status. So that's the difference. If an undocumented person gets married to a U.S. citizen, that will not forgive them from being illegally present in the United States. So those are the 2 differences between an undocumented person and a person who entered the United States legally, but then overstayed their visa. Okay, and I think the other question, if I remember correctly, is that what happens if can an officer come? They usually don't come in disguise. They usually come and they kind of identify themselves, and they want to see, they're going to show you a badge and identify themselves as an officer. They're not going to be coming incognito in church attire and sit in the congregation and say, surprise, I'm arresting you. It's nothing like that. And what was the other question? You asked me.
The other question was, what are we looking for on the warrant?
Okay, that's an excellent question. We have a sample of those warrants that would be helpful to you. And I know it's weird because for you, a warrant is a warrant. So why do we have to become legal officers now? But you need to know, right? So there are 2 types of warrants. There's a warrant that's issued, and at the top you'll see it will say that it says immigration warrant, and it's signed by an immigration officer, okay? There's another warrant, which you'll see at the top of it, it will say circuit court or some kind of court, judicial court, and at the bottom, you'll see judge, right? It's supposed to have a person's name on it and their address and who they're looking for, or it may say an area of search. They're looking for certain documents. You need to, and sometimes the federal warrant may have some problems with it. So, but the thing is that most of the officers who come, they come with this ordinary warrant. It's called an administrative warrant. That does not allow access. It is a judge, it's a federal warrant issued by a judge that allows you access. And that's the one that will allow them to have access in certain places. And you need to know the difference. In the package that I sent to Dr. Romero, I put two different of the warrant side by side so you would know the difference. And that is why it's important for your designated person to know this, because not everybody can know this. But if you have a person who's prepared and trained to deal with this, that works. So for that example, you can just contact Dr. Romero and he can give you an example of what it looks like.
Again, thank you so much, Attorney Stewartson, for your time and your wisdom. We know that there's so much more that could be said and shared, and we know that we have access to you, and so we appreciate that. I'm going to ask if our president, Elder Marvin Brown, will just kind of give us some closing remarks, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney. This has been, as already stated, very, very informational and most helpful to our constituents. As our constituents can clearly see, we have one of the very best. And for that, we are eternally grateful. And again, I want to thank Dr. Hurst and Dr. Romero. Now, let me say before I give a remark that comes from the regional conferences, we will get a copy of what a warrant looks like to each of our pastors. All of our pastors will get copies of what a federal warrant looks like and what an immigration warrant looks like. Our attorney has been gracious enough to supply those, and we will make sure that our pastors get copies of those types of warrants within the next couple of days. Also, we will get copies of the card with what you should say to an ICE officer should they show up. And we would ask that our pastors make copies of these cards to give to all of our members, and that will certainly help tremendously. Now, I would like to share with you just a brief statement of where we are as regional conferences. There are 9 regional conferences, and part of the statement reads as follows. Our values on these matters emerge directly from a biblical mandate to love and support the stranger or immigrant. We therefore affirm the sacred responsibility of our institutions to support the vulnerable and uphold the rights of the marginalized in society. Additionally, we value the humanity of all people, regardless of their place of origin, and categorically reject any effort to broadly describe immigrant communities as subhuman, eating their neighbors' pets, murderers, rapists, or other xenophobic characterizations. As we continue to respect the laws of our land, we must safeguard and defend the constitutional rights of immigrant communities. Immigrant families bring great value to our society. They pay taxes, they help run essential services, and enrich our community with the beauty of diversity. Therefore, included with this statement is policy guidance for our church and school leaders to assist in navigating this new environment on immigration enforcement. During this time of uncertainty and fear, our pastors and educational staff stand ready to provide spiritual support and assistance to families negatively impacted by these policy changes. As a faith community, we will continue to be guided by Christ's admonition to love thy neighbor as thyself. Indeed, Christ's compassionate mandate that when I was a stranger, you took me in, reinforces our unwavering commitment to support the least of these during this challenging time. We recommit to the values of love, compassion, justice, and community as the necessary counterweights to fear. We encourage other people of faith and conscience to join us in this stand. I want you to know I am married to an immigrant. My wife comes from Zambia, Africa. And like our attorney, we know what it is like to go through the immigration process. And we will not abandon any of our members. And we reject hate. We believe in the idea of treating others the way we would want to be treated. And so we want you to know that we do love you and that we do care. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure you are provided with the resources that you need to defend your constitutional rights in this country. And so therefore, I want to thank you again for joining us today. I'm going to ask Pastor Perdomo, Pastor, would you pray for us in your native language? And I'm going to ask that God will bless each of you. And please know we will continue to stand in solidarity and support with any and everyone that is in need. Pastor?
Yes. Padre nuestro que estás en los cielos, te agradecemos en esta hora la oportunidad que nos das de poder reunirnos como iglesia en medio de circunstancias, por momentos, Señor, inestables para muchas de nuestras comunidades hispanas o extranjeras en este país. Te agradecemos la oportunidad que nos das que a través de la conferencia pueda, Señor, el presidente y con todo el equipo que allí trabaja, proveernos de información y de ayuda, Señor, para seguir adelante. Confiamos en los planes que tienes para nosotros como iglesia y sabemos que siempre, Señor, en momentos difíciles, tu mano ha provisto de manera necesaria para tu pueblo. Y confiamos que esta vez así será, Señor. Son muchos los que en incertidumbre están hoy en casa, en las iglesias, en diferentes lugares. Y bueno, Señor, esto solo nos dice una cosa también, y es que tu venida está muy cerca. Es tiempo de predicar el evangelio para que puedas volver, Señor. Ayúdanos, Padre, a hacer tu voluntad y ayúdanos a orar conforme sus oramos, Señor. Amén y amén.
Amen. Amen. God bless you. Thanks so much again, everyone.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
attorney.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks,
Muito
Doc.
obrigado.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Merci.
Good night.
Night night.